stop. Before you do anything else right now, before you scroll, before you skip ahead to the next thing waiting for your attention, I need you to hear this. God is saying no, not to you. Not about your worth or your calling or your future. God is saying no to what is about to happen to you if you miss what this message is carrying. And the reason this is marked as an emergency is not for the algorithm. It is because what is on the other side of the next few minutes is either the thing that changes your trajectory or the thing you will spend years wishing you had paid closer attention to in the moment it was available. So here is where we begin. God has set something up, a specific arrangement placed specifically for you at this specific point in your story, not in general specifically. There is a sequence of events, a convergence of timing, people, and resources that God has been engineering for longer than you realize. And the enemy knows about it. The enemy has been watching the sequence develop, and the enemy has installed exactly one trap directly inside the setup, one specific mechanism designed to make the person for whom the setup was arranged either dismiss the whole thing as ordinary or walk away from it as dangerous. And the tragedy is not that most chosen ones get taken out by something dramatic and obvious. The tragedy is that most chosen ones get taken out by something quiet, by a reaction pattern so familiar they do not even register it as a decision when it happens. I want to be precise about what a divine setup actually is, because the word is used loosely, and I am not using it loosely here. When God engineers a setup, the setup is not a test of your worthiness. It is not a trap that God is watching to see whether you fall into. It is not a challenge placed in your way to refine your character. Though character refinement may happen as a byproduct, a divine setup is a specific alignment of circumstances, timing, people, and resources that God has arranged to move a chosen one from one level of their assignment to the next. It is a transition mechanism. It is the kind of moment that when chosen ones look back from the other side of it, they describe as the thing that changed everything. The pivot point, the clear line between who they were before and who they became after. Divine setups are not always dramatic. Some of them look completely ordinary from the outside. Some of them are a conversation, a decision, a message that arrives in an ordinary format at an ordinary time. The extraordinary nature of the setup is not always visible in the packaging. It is visible in the consequences, in the trajectory change that follows the choice to engage fully with what God placed there versus the flatness that follows the choice to scroll past. And here is what makes divine setup so significant in the larger story. A chosen one who crosses through a divine setup does not just advance their own calling. They carry an authority into their next season that they could not have accessed without the specific passage. The enemy understands this. The enemy does not just want to delay you. The enemy wants to prevent you from acquiring what only comes from crossing through the specific thing God arranged. Which is why the trap is not placed around the setup. It is placed inside it, where you will not see it as a trap because you are already inside the thing God is doing. I am going to describe 5 specific forms this trap takes inside a divine setup, and I need you to listen for the one you recognize. Not the most dramatic one, not the most extreme version, the one you have actually encountered, the one you have actually used. Even when you thought you were being wise or careful or discerning, because the enemy does not craft one-size-fits-all traps. The enemy studies the specific person, the specific history, the specific wound that is most adjacent to what God is currently arranging. And the trap is built from material you already know and in other contexts have every reason to trust. This mission of carrying these precise truths about divine setups and the traps inside them to the chosen ones who need to see them clearly before the moment of decision passes takes real investment to sustain. Behind every word here is prayer, preparation, and the faithful partnership of people who received something real and chose to carry it forward. If you believe I am speaking to you right now, tap the like button and let it be your first act of listening. Subscribe so you do not miss the rest of what I have to say to you, and type Amen in the comments so that your agreement is written down where you can return to it later. The first form is the familiarity dismissal. This is when a divine setup arrives in completely ordinary packaging. No thunder, no supernatural confirmation, no feeling of profound significance to mark the moment. It looks like something you have encountered before in a different context. An opportunity that does not feel remarkable. A door that opens quietly without the weight you expected. A God-arranged door to carry. And the trap is the thought pattern that says, if this were truly from God, I would feel something more significant than what I am feeling right now. So the chosen one passes through without fully engaging. They are present in body but absent in depth. The surface level of the encounter is engaged, while the deeper invitation goes unrecognized, and the setup moves through without the chosen one ever understanding what was available inside it. The second form is the wound redirect. This is the most surgically precise of the 5. The enemy locates the specific previous wound that is most adjacent to what God is trying to do now. Not a distant wound, the recent one. The one that still has a live edge on it. The last time something looked like this, it ended in a specific kind of disappointment that cost you something you are still in some way paying for. The last time you followed something that presented itself as a calling, it placed you in a situation that felt like exposure and abandonment. So when God arranges the present setup, the enemy does not argue against it theologically. The enemy does not suggest that you are unworthy or that God does not love you. The enemy simply redirects your attention to the evidence from the last time. And the chosen one, acting from what feels like entirely reasonable self-protection rather than fear, steps back from the edge of what God arranged. The protection reflex is real. The wound that activated it is real. The enemy simply pointed at it from exactly the right angle and at exactly the right moment. The third form is the urgency inversion. This is when God is doing something in sequence and the enemy collapses the timeline artificially. God builds a setup in layers. There is a sequence to the arrangement. There is a process of preparation that the setup requires in order to produce what it is designed to produce. And the enemy inserts into that process a manufactured urgency that says, if this were truly from God, it should be moving faster than this. So the chosen one either abandons what God arranged because it appears to have stalled, or they begin to force the timing in ways that actually break the sequence that made the setup possible. They act from urgency rather than from the pace the setup requires, and the arrangement which needed the chosen one to hold steady and move at a specific tempo cannot survive the forcing. The fourth form is the counterfeit resolution. This is the most sophisticated of the 5 and the one most likely to be confused with a blessing. Before the divine setup fully arrives, before the sequence completes, the enemy provides a version of what the setup was meant to produce. Not a bad version, necessarily, a good enough version. A relationship that looks like the right one, but arrives before the formation required to sustain it. A platform that creates visibility before the depth and rootedness that visibility requires. A financial opening that creates dependency instead of freedom. Because the character development the setup was meant to produce had not yet happened, the chosen one receives what looks like an answer. The pressure and hunger that was supposed to sustain them through the full process of the setup is released prematurely. And when the actual setup arrives, they are not in the condition required to enter it. The counterfeit did not destroy them. It just made the real thing unnecessary in the moment it arrived. The fifth form is the legitimacy challenge. The setup arrives, and the enemy immediately supplies a theological or logical argument against it. Who told you this was specifically from God? What evidence do you have that this is not simply a coincidence or a product of wishful thinking? Do you know how many people have believed God was doing something specific and have been wrong? Sometimes catastrophically wrong. This form is particularly effective against chosen ones who have a developed intellectual and spiritual life, who value genuine discernment, who have watched others go off track by claiming divine direction for decisions that were ultimately self-serving. The enemy weaponizes the very discernment that was developed through faithfulness. The challenge is not irrational. It sounds like wisdom. It arrives at the precise moment designed to prevent entry into what God arranged, and the chosen one walks away feeling responsible and careful rather than feeling like they just stepped out of a setup. Now I want to ask you something directly. Which of these 5 did you recognize? Not the one that sounded most interesting theologically, the one your chest responded to, the one that matched a season you have been through or a specific moment you are in right now. Because the reason God said no, no, no is not that the setup is too dangerous for you to enter. It is that the enemy has placed one of these 5 traps inside the setup, and without seeing it clearly, the most sincere and capable chosen ones walk into the trap from inside the very thing God arranged for their advancement. Today, we are going to do something different. We are going to see it clearly before the moment of decision arrives. I want to go deeper into why the trap works, not just the 5 forms which we named in the first part of this message, the mechanics underneath them. Because if you only know what the trap looks like from the outside, you can recognize it in hindsight. But if you understand why it works, you can recognize it in real time while you are inside the setup before the moment of decision has passed. The trap works because of a specific dynamic that shows up in every major divine setup recorded in Scripture. And I have studied enough of these stories in enough depth that I can tell you the pattern is not accidental. It is not coincidental that the same mechanism appears in the story of Joseph and in the story of Ruth and in the story of Daniel and in the story of the disciples on the road to Emmaus. The mechanism is the same because the enemy understood the mechanism before any human being did. And the mechanism is this: every divine setup requires a moment of active, non-defended receptivity in order to produce what it was designed to produce. And that specific state, non-defended receptivity, is precisely what the trap is designed to prevent. This work of finding the chosen ones inside their divine setups and giving them the setup literacy to recognize the trap before the moment of decision passes continues because of the faithful partnership of people who received something real here and chose to proceed into it. And if these Bible-centered messages have encouraged your walk with Christ, we invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs biblical hope today. If this ministry has blessed your life, and you would like to help us continue sharing Scripture-centered encouragement around the world, you can support the ministry through the link provided below. Every contribution reaches the next chosen one before the setup they are currently in passes without them ever understanding what was available inside it. Give what your spirit confirms. The link is right there. I want to use a specific story to illustrate this because the abstract explanation is not enough. This is the story of Elisha and the servant at Dothan. Most people who know this story focus on the army of horses and chariots of fire that God revealed to the servant when Elisha prayed for his eyes to be opened. The supernatural element is compelling, and it is the part that gets repeated. But the thing that most people pass over is what was happening before Elisha prayed. The servant was already present, already awake, already looking at the same situation Elisha was looking at. The information was available to both of them at the same time. Same eyes, same morning, same location, same visible threat surrounding the city. The difference was not information. The difference was receptivity. Elisha was in a state that allowed him to see what was actually present. The servant was in a state of fear, contracted perception, which narrowed his field to the visible threat and blocked access to the larger reality that was also present in the same space. God did not create a new reality for the servant when Elisha prayed. God opened access for the servant to a reality that was already there. The setup had been in place the entire time. The servant simply was not in the condition required to receive it. I want you to sit with that for a moment before we move on. The setup was not created when Elisha prayed. The chariots were already there. The angelic presence was already in position. The provision that the servant needed in order to not be destroyed by fear was present in the same location where the fear was operating. The prayer did not produce the resource. The prayer opened the receiver. And the moment the receiver opened the resource that had been present and inaccessible became present and available. This is the model for what happens inside a divine setup. The arrangement is not waiting for your worthiness to activate it. It is waiting for your receptivity to receive it. This is the dynamic inside every divine setup. The arrangement is in place. The resources, the timing, the people, the provision are present in the same space where you are present. The difference between the chosen one who crosses through the setup and the one who passes through without ever understanding what was available is not the presence or absence of the arrangement. It is the presence or absence of the interior condition required to receive what the arrangement contains. And now I want to name something that most of this conversation avoids because it feels uncomfortable to say directly. The reason most chosen ones are not in that interior condition when the divine setup arrives is not a spiritual failure. It is not a lack of faith or a defect or evidence that they are not truly chosen. It is a specific neurological reality about how the brain processes information under sustained pressure and stress, and how that processing mode affects the capacity for exactly the kind of non-defended receptivity that divine setup requires. We are going to come back to this in a few parts. For now, I want you to hold it as a question. Why, despite your sincerity and your genuine desire to receive what God has for you, does the reception often feel partial? Why does the clear knowing come and go? Why does the moment of deep certainty arrive and then fade before you have fully acted from it? There is something specific that happens in the brain of a person who has been carrying sustained pressure for a long time. Something measurable, something that the Nobel Prize research we will discuss later in this message addresses directly for now. The thing I want to name is this: the experience of knowing something deeply and then losing access to that knowing within minutes or hours. The experience of being certain in one moment and uncertain in the next. The experience of the signal arriving clearly and then becoming static is not a spiritual symptom, it is a neurological one. And neurological symptoms have neurological solutions. Let me tell you about a woman I will call Rachel. Not her actual name, but her story is real. And it is the story I receive in more variations than almost any other from people who engage with this content deeply. Rachel had been in a specific season of preparation for years, not passive preparation, active, committed, costly preparation. She had said yes to every invitation to grow that had arrived in that season. She had done the inner work. She had built the disciplines. She had cleared the debts and the relationships and the mental patterns that she knew were blocking her. By every metric she was aware of, she was ready. And then the divine setup arrived. It did not look the way she had imagined it. It arrived as a specific invitation to step into a space that was adjacent to her calling, but not exactly her calling as she had been holding it. It arrived with an unusual messenger, someone she would not have expected God to use based on her existing understanding of how God had been working in her life. It arrived quietly without confirmation from the people she had been asking for confirmation. And Rachel, who was sincere and prepared and genuinely chosen, did 2 of the 5 things we named in the first part of this message. She applied the familiarity dismissal because the packaging was unfamiliar. And then she applied the legitimacy challenge because she could not get confirmation from the sources she had been consulting. The setup passed, not gone permanently. God does not abandon setups, but the sequence that was arranged moved into a different configuration. The specific convergence of timing and people and resources that was present in that window was no longer present in the same way 6 months later. And what Rachel described when she finally understood what had been available was not regret in the dramatic sense. It was a quiet, specific grief for the particular version of the thing that had been arranged for that moment that was no longer available in that exact form. She also described something that I want to name directly because I have heard it in enough variations to know it is not unique to her. She said that in the weeks after the setup passed, she returned to the memory of the invitation repeatedly, not to analyze it, because something in her kept reaching back toward the quality of what had been present in that first moment of contact. That initial flash of knowing before the analysis began, it was as if the deeper part of her understood what the analytical part had dismissed and was not willing to fully accept that dismissal as final. That reaching back is significant. It is the signal trying to be heard after the moment for acting on it has passed. It is the receiver trying to stay open past the point where the transmission was available. She told me she knew in the first 10 minutes that something was significant about the invitation. There was a knowing that was present below the level of her analytical evaluation. But she had no reliable way to hold on to that knowing while the analysis was running. By the time she had completed the discernment process she had learned to run, the knowing had faded and the analysis had produced the result it tends to produce when it runs without the counterweight deep receptivity. It said not enough evidence. Wait, let me say something about that specific experience. The knowing that arrives in the first moments of a divine setup and then fades during analysis is not random. It is not the unreliable intuition that wisdom traditions warn against. It is the most accurate signal available in the moment it arrives. What makes it fade is not the quality of the signal. It is the specific neurological condition of the receiver when the brain is operating in the partial capacity that sustained pressure and stress produces over time. The capacity to hold open awareness, to sustain a signal without immediately resolving it into the categories of the analytical mind, is dramatically reduced. The signal arrives. The analytical system immediately begins processing it, and in the processing the depth of the signal is lost, while the surface information remains. You remember that something felt significant. You cannot access what the significance was pointing toward, and the setup that required you to move from the depth of the knowing passes while you are working with the memory of it. We are now at the heart of this message, and I want to pause here and say something directly. This ministry was built to find the chosen ones at the exact moment when the arrangement God engineered for their advancement is in front of them, and to give them the clarity they need to enter it fully rather than pass through it partially. And it continues because of the partnership of people who received something real here and chose to be part of what carries it forward. If today this message has been reaching the places it was always sent for, support this mission through the link in the pinned comment. Give what your spirit confirms. The link is right there. So now we have named the problem with the precision it requires. We have named the 5 forms the trap takes. We have named the dynamic of non-defended receptivity and why it is both necessary for a divine setup to deliver what it contains and precisely what the trap is designed to prevent. We have looked at the story of Elisha and the servant at Dothan. We have followed Rachel through the setup that passed and the specific grief of understanding, in retrospect, what was available. And now I want to give you something that changes the experience from this moment forward, not eventually starting in the next few minutes of this message. There are 3 specific practices that build what I am going to call setup literacy, the ability to recognize a divine setup while you are inside it rather than only in hindsight. These are not abstract spiritual principles. They are practical, specific, repeatable actions that address each of the 3 primary failure modes we have identified. I am going to describe each one carefully, and then we are going to do one of them together in this message before we close. The first practice is the stillness interrupt. This addresses the familiarity dismissal and the legitimacy challenge, the first and 5th forms of the trap. When something arrives that may be a setup, before you evaluate it, before you run the discernment process, before you consult anyone, before you do anything with the content of the invitation, you take 30 seconds of complete stillness, not to listen for a voice, not to feel a feeling, simply to stop the analytical processing that begins automatically the moment something enters your awareness. Here is why this matters at the neurological level. The analytical mind processes at a specific speed and tends to reach resolution quickly. The deeper receptive capacity of the right hemisphere processes more slowly and requires the analytical system to pause in order to contribute its reading of the situation. 30 seconds of stillness after an invitation arrives is not a spiritual technique. It is giving the full brain a moment to register what is present before the faster analytical system files it under familiar categories and moves on. Most chosen ones have never tried this because it feels too simple. The setups that have passed by them while they were in the middle of their discernment process were not resolved by a more sophisticated process. They were resolved by 30 seconds they did not give themselves. There is a specific quality that the deeper receptive process carries that the analytical system does not produce. And that quality is available in the stillness that follows the arrival of an invitation before the analysis takes over. It feels like a particular kind of spaciousness, like the question is held open rather than immediately pressed toward resolution. Some people describe it as a warmth. Some describe it as a weight in the chest that is not uncomfortable. Some describe it simply as knowing without knowing why they know. Whatever the description, it is the reading that the full brain produces when both hemispheres are given a moment to register what arrived together before the left hemisphere begins. The processing sequence that tends to narrow the field down to what is already known and categorized. The second practice is the signal journal. This addresses the wound, redirect, and the counterfeit resolution. The second and fourth forms of the trap. The signal journal is a simple practice. Anytime you have an experience of the knowing I described in the previous part of this message, the flash of recognition that arrives before the analysis starts, you write it down. Not the analysis, not your evaluation of whether the signal is trustworthy. The raw signal, what it felt like, where in your body it was present, what it was pointing toward at its most basic level before the thinking started. The reason this practice changes the dynamic is that it creates an archive that the analytical mind cannot revise. The wound redirect works partly because the analytical mind reframes the signal after the fact before the final practices of this message. One more invitation. You have stayed through every form of the trap named through the Elisha and servant at Dothan's story, through Rachel's that passed through the neurological truth about why receptivity fails under sustained pressure. This ministry will keep delivering this kind of precise divine intelligence to the chosen ones who are inside their setups and need to see clearly before the window closes. The text discusses the importance of developing trust in one's own intuitive signals, through practices like maintaining a signal journal, which tracks initial responses before analytical interference occurs. This journal serves as an evidence base that helps individuals recognize patterns over time, restoring confidence in their inner knowing that has often been undermined by past analytical evaluations. Additionally, the concept of the setup assumption encourages individuals to adopt a posture of receptivity, focusing on what God is currently arranging in their lives. This shifts the perspective from defensively evaluating the relevance of experiences to actively seeking understanding of the broader context and requirements of the sequence of events unfolding. The text emphasizes the necessity of remaining open to subtle signals, teaching that this receptivity is a learnable skill supported by neurological foundations. Maintaining a community where individuals share their signals can further enhance this practice, diminishing feelings of isolation. Finally, it highlights the need for addressing underlying neurological issues caused by sustained pressure to fully engage with these practices, referencing Dr. Roger Sperry's discovery about the synchronized operation of brain hemispheres for optimal cognitive processing. When synchronization in the brain is disrupted due to ongoing pressure and stress, the left hemisphere dominates while the right hemisphere quiets, diminishing whole brain awareness without affecting intellectual capacity or commitment. The analytical system remains functional, but receptive capacity suffers, impacting the ability for deep understanding and insight. Most children exhibit whole brain synchronization naturally, but by adulthood, only a fraction maintain this level. This decline is attributed not to choice, but to modern life's pressures. The resulting gap causes individuals, especially those with significant callings, to operate below their full neurological potential. Experiences shared by individuals reveal that they feel blocked despite various practices. A team of neuroscientists led by Dr. Daniel Barron developed an 8-minute auditory sequence called the Genius Switch, designed to restore hemisphere synchronization. Unlike other sound-based tools, it directly addresses the root issue of disconnection. This method targets those who have sought deeper connection and understanding, eliminating the fog caused by reduced brain function. Dr. Barron's work is distinct. Other similar products lack the necessary neural technology. Detailed information about the Genius Switch and access options is transparently available through the link provided. Clinical-grade home neurofeedback hardware typically costs between $5,000 and $7,000. Excluding software, Dr. Barron and his team aim to create an affordable solution resulting in a product valued by neuroscience colleagues at $500, yet it is available for just $49. Currently, there is an additional discount reducing the price to $39. The offer includes an unconditional guarantee allowing users to experience an 8-minute sequence anytime if the improvements seen by 18,000 prior users aren't felt. Users can request a full refund with no conditions. 4 bonuses are guided visualization from a top CAM platform teacher, a grocery guide for brain health, a foundational text on contemporary practices, and a daily habits guide for sustaining brain synchronization. If you resonate with the described experiences of cognitive struggles, this tool isn't just supplementary, it restores necessary capacities. The message emphasizes that divine setups are not fleeting. Their recognition requires a restored ability to perceive and act upon them, making it essential for lasting clarity. The neurological foundation is what truly sustains moments of clarity, urging a simple daily practice at a low cost. The message emphasizes fixing mechanisms to enhance effectiveness in recognizing divine signals. It reassures that ongoing preparation is purposeful, leading to significant outcomes rather than a stagnant holding pattern. God's arrangements are genuine, and this message aims to provide the understanding needed to transition from contemplation to action. A moment of stillness is encouraged to process these insights, affirming the presence of a consistent signal that has been interrupted by previous barriers. The encouragement is to overcome various traps that hinder progress, reaffirming that God's setup is alive and not reliant on perfect certainty for engagement. Listeners are urged to recognize their worthiness and the reality of their situation as the tools for transition have been given. The final challenge of legitimacy is addressed, emphasizing that it applies to everyone, dispelling doubts of being unworthy. Participants are encouraged to witness and articulate their experiences, fostering community specificity that diminishes the trap's grip. The conversation will continue emphasizing growth and the transformation of the almost cycle through collective engagement and spiritual insight. Now, 4 things before this message closes. The first is your declaration. Go to the comments right now and type the number of the trap form you recognize from the 5 that were named. Or simply type, "I see it as the moment your own voice acknowledges which specific mechanism has been operating in your story as the act of setup literacy that begins with naming what was previously unnamed." Type it now. The conversation continues in the comments. The second is the like button. Press it now, not as a casual gesture. Press it as the act of a spirit that receives something real and precise here and wants this message to reach the next chosen one who is currently inside their divine setup without the tools to recognize what is available inside it when you press like you carry this word further. 1 click, do it now. The third is the subscribe button. Hit it now and turn on the notification bell. This message named the problem, named the mechanism, and named the 3 practices. The next message in this sequence carries the next layer of what setup literacy requires. Stay connected to the channel that was built to find you at the exact moments this kind of precision is needed. Subscribe now. The fourth is to share this message today. There is a chosen one in your world who is also inside a divine setup right now, applying one of the 5 trap forms without knowing. It is a track who also has the arrangement in front of them and cannot see because of the specific contraction that sustained pressure produces. Send this to them. Post it. Be the means by which setup literacy reaches the next chosen one before their window closes. The setup is not gone. The arrangement is still in place, and now you have the tools to enter it. And so it is. Do not let this sacred moment of destiny pass you by. Your breakthrough is waiting. And if these Bible-centered messages have encouraged your walk with Christ, we invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs biblical hope today. If this ministry has blessed your life and you would like to help us continue sharing scripture-centered encouragement around the world, you can support the ministry through the link provided below or becoming a member of our community. This is how you guarantee you never miss the direct, personalized messages that are specifically meant to elevate and empower your life. But your presence, attention, and energy already mean the world. Take the step.